All right, welcome all. Welcome to Saturday Night Starship Combat.
You must be Alec. My name is Chris.
Yes, I've been MIA for a while. I've been in I've been living in the year 1990 when there was no internet. For those of you who haven't heard, we moved a few weeks ago, and we moved out to Monroe, Georgia, and into a brand new development, but it's in the county, not in the city, and it's basically the sticks. And so there's no internet yet, but they were just putting in fiber today. So we've been living there for 3 weeks without internet, with basically our phones. So that's why I haven't been here, but I know Chris and Pat have been doing an admirable job in my absence. So tonight we got back from dinner in Athens, Georgia, and I was like, hey, I got time to drive up to the studio where there's internet. And and so here we are. So welcome those of you. I know we have a ton of new subscribers the past 2 weeks because of the trailer we put up. And some of you may be watching tonight. And Starship Tactical, our Saturday night show, is all about starship combat and science fiction. Obviously, a lot of that is in Star Trek. Chris Weave is a naval analyst, war game expert, and he usually entertains us. And Pat and I just like hang out. Pat usually, every other show, Pat comes out with an awesome PowerPoint, and he has one he's going to share with us tonight. Tonight, Pat, what are we talking about tonight?
So I thought tonight what we would do is talk about Captain Kirk and the Enterprise in the original series and go through the different battles that the Enterprise fought through the, and a lot of this will be about Captain Kirk and probably get into some of his leadership and stuff like that. So we're going to talk about, it's going to be probably a 2 or 3 part thing because I don't think we got enough time to get through all of it in detail.
Not a problem. Oh, and by the way, in case you guys haven't figured, I am broadcasting from the bridge of the USS Ares. I was just going to broadcast from my chair, but Chris is like, "Get on the bridge."
You had said
using it.
You had said that you were going to broadcast from the bridge when you sent me the message saying that you were going to be here tonight, and then you were back in the fulfillment area, and I said I thought you were going to do it from the bridge. So.
Stop letting the bridge get away of a good story.
Yeah, there we go. So
the bridge is cool. The bridge is cool.
Good. No, it is. It is. I mean, we love showing it off. So many people have done such an amazing job on this bridge. You see the monitor screens back there that are Alexander Richardson and Dana Wagner's work. Dana Wagner did the you can see the dedication plaque back there. It's great. So
and one of the things that I'd like to point out about the bridge is that I don't know if you ever saw my guess is you probably have, Alec, the props from the original series. And when you see them up close, because I saw them at the Smithsonian, when you see them up close, it's like, huh. Like, for instance, the Klingon belts. The Klingon belts are a standard cloth belt like Boy Scouts wear, except what they did is they took a piece of bubble wrap. They cut out a square of bubble wrap, pasted it on the belt buckle so you didn't have that shiny belt buckle, and then spray painted it gold to give it some texture. And so you like all the Klingon phasers are clearly just carved pieces of wood when you see them up close. So I was kind of expecting when I went to the bridge that I'd get there and it would be one of those things where, like, okay, it looks really great on screen, but up close and personal, you can kind of, no, it looks really damn impressive in person. It looks really impressive.
Yeah, I was looking at the consoles and everything like that from one of the ones where you were interviewing people and looking at the net, trying to look at the details of the consoles and everything. So it was pretty cool to see. It's nice work, really nice work.
So that have you done a tour of the bridge before?
Well, we've done. Yeah, as a matter of fact, on Axanar Confidential on last Friday, we did it on Axanar Confidential, and Dale Simpson was here with me, and he took his camera and showed all the panels. And we did a little bit last night as well. Right now, it's a bit of a mess. I'll just give it, because we did a big fundraiser last night. You see all the boxes on the bridge because we did a fundraiser for dog rescue. And those are all the the mystery boxes, but you guys will get a kick out of this. So that we had $25 and $50 mystery boxes, which you can still buy in the Aries Studios store. All the money going to dog rescue. And one of the things we give out is this. Have you seen this? The Klingon Bird of Prey Owner's Manual.
Yeah.
It's the companion to the Enterprise Owner's Manual. And it's really impressive. I mean,
yeah, it's a Sternbach book, and all the I've often said Pat just showed his version of it. Mine is open on my iPad, even as we speak. It's one of the open tabs on my iPad. It's a Sternbach book, and I've often said that my favorite version of Star Trek is Sternbach Okuda.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Yeah, this is one of the things that I always found. Here that they made two ships.
Yeah,
one small and one big, and they were the exact same ship. That doesn't work on so many levels.
And I think they got that directly out of FASA.
Yeah, they did. And actually, you could argue that there's three.
In FASA, there's three. Yeah, in FASA, there's three.
Because the even smaller version would be the little 12-man dealie that you see, in the movies, in the original series movies.
Yeah.
The Burrell seems to have like a crew of about 36, and then the Cavort is kind of the cruiser-sized ship. The only analog to that in real world is the F-18 and the F-18E and F. Those are distinctly different planes. Not the size discrepancy like that, but
those are interesting airplanes. To the casual observer, they look like they're the same.
Right.
And I thought they kind of looked the same until I saw an overlay on one on top of the other, at which point I said, wow, the Navy lied to Congress and got away with it.
There you go.
Although there is a huge amount of parts commonality, but it really, when you see them side by side, it's like, no, those really aren't really the
They're
same.
not the same airplane. Not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, and we talked about this previously, and I called up. Let's see if I can find the photo that shows it. And it is crazy. It is. Here's the show. Here's the photo that shows what the difference between the F-18E and F is. Let me share that with you guys, just to show everyone the point that you're making. Where's that? Sorry, it's not pulling up. Oh, there we go. Oh, wait, come on.
It's got to throw in all the advertisements, right?
Oh, God. Here we go. Hopefully you guys can see this. So you look at it there, and yeah, you're going, holy crap. That's not even the same plane.
And if you see the plan view superimposed on each other, an F-18EF is a huge airplane. It has the same spot as an F-14, and spot is the term that they use to describe how much space it takes up on the deck of an aircraft carrier. So the spot, the size of that you have to allow for it, is the same for that as for an F-14, which is one of the heaviest airplanes I've ever flown off of aircraft carriers.
All right, here's another. Just to show you that, since you mentioned it,
and
there you go.
Yeah, that's yeah, yeah.
That's like two different airplanes.
Yes, indeed.
That is really shocking. It is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah,
so I would love to understand the design philosophy, like why you would do that. I mean, basically, you're scaling up the airplane. I'm fascinated. I would be fascinated really to understand that.
So it's not going to surprise you to know that I know at least part of that story.
Why no? That didn't surprise me, Chris. Why don't you tell us?
So it all starts off with the lightweight fighter competition that also produced the F-16. So this was from an acquisition standpoint, it was a really unique approach in that usually when DoD acquires a weapon system, what they do is they give detailed specifications on everything that they want it to be able to do, right? And it's really detailed, and it's like a 100-page document, and you have to follow it to the letter, or at least you have to come close. For the lightweight fighter, they gave a 4-page request for proposals, and it basically just told them what the end state they wanted was. It didn't specify anything about how it got there. It just said, this is what we're looking for. And there were 2 airplanes that got submitted to the lightweight fighter competition that made it to the finals. They were the YF-16, which became the F-16 fighter for the Air Force, and the YF-17 that got turned into the F-18 for the Navy. It was such an effective approach that even the loser got built.
Yeah, right.
And so, because the loser better met the Navy's needs, because they were looking for a fighter also. But if you think about it, it all started off as the lightweight fighter, right? It was sort of intentionally small. So one of the complaints that people have had about the F-18 is that it's got short legs. And it's not really that it's got short legs, because the range is on the low side, but it's not abnormally so. One of my bosses was a former F-18 pilot, and he said the real problem with the F-18 was that it was so efficient that all the tricks that you would do to increase engine efficiency didn't work, because it was already at sort of maximum fuel efficiency. So usually there was all these things that you could do while you were waiting for because all the airplanes don't take off at once. It's not like Battlestar Galactica where everybody has their own launch catapult and they can all go at the same time. You got to cycle through, right? And you can launch about 4 planes a minute, right? Because you've got 4 catapults, right? So these 2 go, you let those planes sort of get out of the way, the next 2 go, then you're bringing up planes because they've got these things called the jet blast deflectors, which are part of the deck that they have to lower the jet blast deflector, bring the airplane in, hook them all up, do everything, do the final salute, and shoot them off. So you can do about 4 planes a minute. Well, if you're launching 80 planes, that's 20 minutes, right? So it takes a little time to get them in the air, and there's always little problems here and there, and somebody might have a bad cat and they got to reset or something. So there's always issues in there. And so, so you've got some planes that are just sort of circling, waiting for the other planes to catch up, right? So it used to be, so you'd have to do these timings, it's like, well, you got to send these guys at this time because they're slower, and so the other guys have to sort of launch first because they're slower and the other guys can catch up and this and that. When you add all that stuff up, it meant that the F-18 as originally designed didn't give you a whole lot of flexibility in terms of how to do that. So at some point they said, let's do a new mod of the F-18 and let's just, let's attach the air hose and, the air pump and sort of pump it up a little bit and make it bigger. One of the other things about it is that the fuel fraction, the percentage of the airplane that was devoted to the fuel tanks, the fuel fraction of the YF-17 was 0.17. 17% of the weight was fuel. So that's the sort of fuel fraction that you would normally see for a test aircraft. That's not the sort of fuel fraction you'd normally see for a production aircraft because you want range. But it's what they built the F-18 with. It only has a 0.17 fuel fraction. And so when they built the F-18EF, the Super Hornets, they said, yeah, we need to increase the fuel fraction a little bit to give it some extra range. So it's got a fantastic range. In fact, it can carry so much fuel that there was a worry that the Navy would use them solely for buddy tanking, and so they actually had to negotiate a thing between NavAir and the carrier community that they wouldn't do that they wouldn't just relegate them to buddy tanking. They're both fantastic airplanes, but the EF is really fantastic. One of my former students who was a regular F-18 guy, he said that plane is so good about staying in the air that he said, sometimes your head's in the cockpit, you're not out paying attention, you're doing some administrative task, like you're prepping for a run or something like that. He said, if you're not paying attention to your airspeed, that the computer controls are so good about keeping that airplane in the air that you won't feel the signs of a stall until you're going to stall. That usually the plane will start, I'm sure Pat can talk about this, the plane starts acting weird when you start getting into the stall regime. He said there are times where where all of a sudden he'd look up, he'd look at the airspeed, and then he'd look out at the control surfaces, and the control surfaces are doing this to keep the airplane in the air.
Wow.
And the ride is totally smooth right up until the point where it starts to fall from the sky.
The other thing I remember from years ago back when they were first introduced was the F-18. The software in the F-18 literally allows you to adjust the way the plane feels to the pilot. So if a pilot's used to flying an F-14, you can make the F-18 respond more like that. So it was adaptable. Yes, no.
I've never heard
surprised me.
Perhaps, yeah. I don't know I don't know enough about it. I'd have to ask a friend of mine that flew F-18s, but no, I'm not aware of the ability to make it mimic a specific airplane. Could be, but I'm not aware.
I know that with the F-4, when they originally, so the F-4 was the first sort of all hydraulic fighter, right? It didn't have cables. It was all hydraulics. The F-4 was groundbreaking at a time. It was really kind of the first airplane that they had where one guy couldn't just understand what all the different systems were. And it was really kind of the first one where the pilot had to sort of press the I believe button that the mechanics were doing everything right, because they couldn't really double check them because the plane was just too complex. And when the F-4 was originally built, it had this cable system that was attached to all the controls that did not control surfaces. The purpose of the cable system was solely to give feedback to pilots that were used to having airplanes that had cables, to make it feel like it had cables. And they very quickly went, take that shit out. And so the pilots sort of went, okay, we got it. It's new. It's hydraulic. We're okay with it. Take all because you had to do maintenance on it, right? Because it could screw you up. So they still had to maintain this thing that was just there to lie to the pilot. So they said, we don't need to lie to the pilots. We'll take all that shit out and we'll just use the hydraulics, and the rest was history.
And I do want to say that there was a comment like, aren't we supposed to talk about Star Trek and Axanar? Yes. But we talk about all these real world examples because it gives us a basis from which to then talk about space combat. And
yes,
it gives us a frame of reference. And plus it's damn cool. Jeez.
We talk about Star Trek. We talk about non-Star Trek science fiction. I think the first show that I was on, we spent the entire time talking about Warhammer 40K.
That sounds like something we would do.
So we do a lot of Star Trek stuff. We do a lot of Star Trek. I actually, at some point, I spent.
Everybody stick with us for a few more minutes. Give us some time.
Pat's going to talk about Star Trek. I've got on, not for tonight, but I spent last week prepping. I've got about 6 or 7 slides on Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, and about how the fleet in that show is organized, et cetera. Because Andromeda, in a couple of ways, is kind of Starfleet with the serial numbers filed off, in a universe that is a little bit darker than what we normally see in Star Trek. Although a few people have commented to me that Star Trek Discovery is basically the remake of Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda. I haven't seen the current season of it, so I can't ascertain that. But same sort of idea. So.
All right. Well, Pat, why don't you take us away and let's get going with Kirk and the Enterprise.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let me share my screen here.
And while you're doing that, let me just mention to everyone, please, a couple things, everyone. First, make sure you go and sign up for the Axanar Newsletter. If you are not already, go to axanar.com. You'll see the tab up top says Newsletter. because that's the best way to get all the information about Axanar, Aries Studios, and all the great swag in the Aries Studios store we previewed. So please be part of the newsletter. And then there is the Aries Studios Patreon campaign, which is how we support this wonderful studio, this enormous man cave for all of fandom. So please enjoy that. And then, like, if you want cool stuff, go to the Aries Studios store. We still have some of the Axanar Dog Rescue mystery boxes, which aren't such a mystery after all, as it turns out. So if you're interested, I'll make a quick. Let me just make a quick plug while you're there. So here's a box. You'll get a big box like this, and it's a $25 or $50 donation to Axanar Dog Rescue. We'll raise money for dogs yesterday. This is the Kevin Smith auction catalog, which is amazing. And then we also have the Star Trek auction catalog. Both hardcover, beautiful hardcover books. You also get, this is for $25 or $50. You get 4 Axanar postcards, and you get 4 Axanar Aries stickers, development, construction, the patch, and the badge. You get the Axanar fridge magnet, the USS Aries fridge magnet, for $25. That's all. That's the books alone are $70. But anyway, you get that for $25. If you throw us $50, you also get a DVD of Axanar and Prelude Axanar, and you get the Klingon Bird of Prey book. Plus, you get something else I throw in just because I'm a cool guy. And you guys are awesome for donating to Axanar Dog Rescue. So anyway, those are the Axanar mystery boxes. If you go to the Aries Studio store, just go to Axanar Dog Rescue. You'll see the $25 and $50 mystery boxes and go knock yourself out. And if you want, there's all sorts of other cool stuff, including challenge coins and stuff there. So thank you. Okay, and now off to Pat.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see. Entire screen. All right. So let me know, because I've only got one screen hooked up at the moment. Is this showing? It should say Starship Combat.
No.
No. All right.
Is this a was it the PowerPoint there?
Yeah. Let's see.
You can also,
okay. There we go. I think this should work now. How's that?
There we go.
Okay, cool. So today we're going to talk about, what we're going to talk about basically is we're going to talk about Captain Kirk and the Enterprise under the command of Captain Kirk, and some of the battles, all of the battles that we see in the original series. And if we're still having fun with it, we can take it past and into the movies, of course. So it's not just going to be the battles where Kirk was in command. There were quite a few where Scotty or Sulu was in command too. So we'll look at those. Most of them are fairly short, and there's not a whole lot of meat to them. But and then we get to Balance of Terror, which we went into detail on a couple episodes ago. But what we'll do is we'll also go over that one a little bit too. So as far as inconsistencies go and technical details and such, the original series had a few more technical inconsistencies. They were just kind of writing episode to episode. You can retcon those episodes. Naturally, it's all open to debate and everything like that. But explaining away inconsistencies is not really the focus of this presentation. So I'll probably try to treat each episode as though the assumptions they made in that episode are correct, even if it's not always consistent with everything else in Star Trek. The other assumption is we can assume that the ship was modified and refit throughout its 5-year mission. So just because the Enterprise works one way in one episode, it might work a little bit different in another episode. And there is some basis for that because, the Enterprise works one way in the motion picture, and then in the Wrath of Khan, it does some other things that it apparently couldn't do in the motion picture. So anyways, but retconning and going deep into justifying any inconsistency is not really the point of this. So This is the Captain Kirk that most of us see, or the kind of sometimes the way we think, arrogant, super confident, tactical genius. Nobody can beat him. Klingons long to engage and defeat him in battle. It's their dream. But he didn't start out as a legend. So we're going to go back and look at some of his early battles from the TV show and see if we can find some patterns in his tactics and some of his leadership style, that sort of thing. So what we're going to talk about is a few specific episodes and a little bit about his time at the Academy. So we'll talk a little bit about the Kobayashi Maru. That seems to be a formative thing. We're going to talk about the Corbomite maneuver. Despite the fact it wasn't an actual starship battle, I think it gives us some good insight into Kirk. Then we'll talk about Balance of Terror. And then we'll go into an episode called The Arena and Errand of Mercy. And later on, we will talk about a few other episodes like Journey to Babel, the Enterprise incidents, the Deadly Years, where they encounter some Romulans, and Elan of Troyes, where he gets into a pretty good battle with the Klingon battle cruiser. So we'll get into some of those as we move on. And like I said, see what kind of patterns and tactics and consistency we can find from Kirk and the character. So yeah, these are some of the other battles. Like I said, there's also the Ultimate Computer. Friday's Child is another one where Scotty was in command. So there are quite a few battles that the Enterprise engaged in along the way. So now Kobayashi Maru. So this is the test. We all basically know about it if you've seen any Star Trek movie for the most part. But cadets and young officers take this test in a bridge simulator, and the cadets command the ship. And the basic setup for this is they receive a distress call from a damaged civilian ship. It happens to be in enemy territory, across a treaty boundary of some sort. The civilian ship, the Kobayashi Maru in most cases, its crew and passengers are in danger. Their life support is failing. And the captain must weigh the lives of the Kobayashi Maru versus the violating a treaty, possibly starting a major incident, maybe even a war, and weigh that against their ship and the lives of their own crew. So what would you do in that kind of dilemma? So it's kind of an interesting test. In the book, the novelized version of Star Trek II, Saavik, there's some discussions with Saavik in there discussing the purpose of Starfleet to safeguard the lives of Federation citizens and that sort of thing. And, when they debate and go over the pros and cons of, giving your life to save civilians, perhaps when maybe that officer might have more to offer the Federation than a particular civilian and some of that sort of thing. So anyways, it's an interesting novel and they talk about it quite a bit. So, but we also know that Captain Kirk took the test, and we don't know the canon details of what Kirk did in the Prime universe when he took the Kobayashi Maru. All we know is basically the information we got from Star Trek II, where he took the test 3 times, and it appears to have been very unusual to take the 3rd attempt. And what he did, he reprogrammed the simulator so that it was possible to save the ship. So, and I want to stress, they just used the word possible. So they didn't say it was a cakewalk. They didn't say he just pressed a button, the Klingons blew up and everything was easy. So chances are he would have tried to make it look good because he does use deception. That's in his bag of tricks. So he might have tried to make it look good. So the point is his version, his reprogrammed version might still have been a challenge, unlike what we saw in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, where the test was really one-sided, right? He said, yeah, fire 1 torpedo at each. All the Klingons blew up, and then he pulls out an apple and, tells the sickbay to get ready to beam survivors aboard. So I like to think that Kirk set up at least something slightly more challenging than, something that blatant. So we also know that Kirk studied really hard at the academy, to the point where he was harassed by upperclassmen like Cadet Finnegan. I believe he was referred to as a stack of books with legs. So we do know that, and we also know that Kirk was resourceful. So I'd argue that his hard work that he put in at the academy and in studying, his hard work is what resulted in his ability to be resourceful. And this correlates with some historical at least one particular historical example of a well-known general, General Rommel. He was known for having studied hard at the whatever military academy he was at, while his friends would go out for the weekends and friends and classmates were enjoying themselves. He was still sitting there studying, and obviously that seemed to have given him somewhat of an edge a few years later. So. Unfortunately, he chose the wrong side, but but the point is that this separates our prime timeline Captain Kirk from the J.J. Abrams version of Kirk, who was simply this naturally gifted person, this genius, and everything was just easy, right? He boasted he would complete the academy in 3 years, and so a person, and so basically. Kirk in JJ's universe was a person who, without working, was simply just naturally great, right? As a cadet, he was commanding a starship all of a sudden, or a few years after being a cadet. So in my opinion, being a genius doesn't help you much if you don't have the discipline to develop all those talents and everything. So life just doesn't work that way. So and it's also, frankly, kind of my opinion that that's a terrible message for people and kids especially. That you just expect that everything comes easy, you get to start at the top, and as soon as you graduate college, you'll be in charge. So anyways, if it's a test of character, what do you suppose Kirk's solution says about his character? So clearly he won't give up, and he'll apply knowledge from everything he's learned. He's history. In Star Trek II, we see all the antiques on his wall and everything like that. Tactics, chess, poker, chemistry. Obviously, he has some form of computer skill, or is smart enough to get someone who knows computers really well to help him reprogram the simulator. So he also keeps very knowledgeable people around him, too. So Kirk says he doesn't believe in the no-win scenario. And I don't think that's a bad mindset myself. That's just my opinion. So Cadet Kirk in JJ's version, he calls the Kobayashi Maru test a cheat in itself, because basically if you go by the books and stuff like that, the people running the test, whatever clever solution you think of as a cadet, they will just, oh, well, you blew up the first 3 Klingon ships, we'll send 6 more, they'll overwhelm you. And so you're it's set up so that you're pretty much always going to lose. So one of the big things that this tries to test is it gives commanders and leaders, what they would do if they face a situation where you're choosing from 2 bad choices. And no matter what you do, there are going to be some bad consequences. You simply have to choose what they're going to be. And that's a difficult position to be in. And that's, frequently people in a leadership position, that's exactly the kind of choices they're frequently making. But as we often see in Star Trek, and, I think it's also a good thing to learn and attempt, is if you don't like those first 2 choices, sometimes maybe if you're real imaginative, you might be able to think of a third option. Not always true in real life. So, but it does require some effort. So you can make a decision. And a big part of this and what they're learning in the academy and stuff like that is can you make a decision in a time-constrained environment with imperfect information when no matter what you do, there's going to be some real consequences that might be bad? So that's the test. So as Saavik, after the test, lamented, she didn't feel like it was a fair test of her command abilities. So, but like as Kirk told her, there's no correct resolution. It's a test of character, he told her later on. So, and he also said a no-win situation is a possibility every commander might face. So I've always found the idea of the no-win scenario as part of training to be interesting, because I do training for people and stuff like that too. On the one hand, you can really destroy the confidence of somebody you're trying to train, right? You put them in these no-win situations, all they do is get frustrated and feel like they're no good at what they're doing. So, a big part of training is obviously you want to give people the skills to do a certain task, but you also want to give them the confidence that they know that they can do the task. It's not enough that you know what you're supposed to be doing. You need to know that you know it. So on the other hand, a test like this can also keep people from becoming overconfident and arrogant, showing the decision of poor decisions or the danger of entering certain situations. So another thing with this test is that this test clearly had to evolve over time, because students would talk to each other eventually. Eventually, the word's going to get out. Perhaps the test is considered top secret and you're not allowed to talk about it. And so once you've taken the test, you're sworn to secrecy, and maybe they would abide by that. There are, I'm familiar with, I believe it's SEER training in military aviation, where everyone's got to go through SEER training, which is, survival, escape, and evasion course, where eventually they're going to catch you and they're going to put you in a prison camp, and you're going to go through, they'll even torture you a little bit and stuff. So, but
Pat, by the way, can real quickly hit the hide button. See down there at the bottom and the thing.
Yep.
Look, it's just
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Pat, if I can jump in for a second.
Sure.
There are definitely other places. So my guess is, first of all, that there's an honor code at Starfleet Academy, just like there is at the Academy. And so I imagine that they basically say it's an honor code violation to actually pass this information on. In my last job, there was a certification process that, for instance, that involved you had to sign an NDA before you took the test, and you weren't allowed to tell anybody else what was on the test.
Okay, good.
Basically, you could say, something to the effect of the training materials that they pointed towards you towards are the right things, and if you learn that stuff, you will know what's in the test. But that's about, you weren't allowed to share your notes after you had taken the test. You could share your notes with other colleagues before you took the test, but after you took the test, you weren't supposed to share your notes anymore.
Okay, good. So, go ahead.
One other thing is at the Naval War College during the interwar period, when one of the ways that they got around the gouge sheet telling people how to beat the exam for some of the big war games they did is they just sort of randomly changed elements of the game. So like one year in the final test, torpedoes are killer and gunfire is irrelevant. And the next year, gunfire is killer and torpedoes are irrelevant. Wouldn't surprise me if the Kobayashi Maru test was substantially different from year to year.
Yeah, I would imagine it would get modified periodically. So we can assume the test changes over time. And it's even possible that when a student is getting ready to take the test, they don't know that they're going to face this particular scenario. This could just be, simulator event number 10. And it turns out today's the Kobayashi Maru test for you. So there's any number of ways they could set that up. And then I can kind of compare my experience at the airline with this. When our training department comes up with a test scenario, people tend to talk to each other. Sometimes the word gets out. So what the department compensates by having many variations. And I've sat in on on a whole bunch of them. And every time I sit in on one, it's different. So it keeps people from just memorizing the test essentially. But we in fact do put people in a no-win scenario. I don't know if anyone's familiar with wind shear, but it's basically you get a big column of air, planes coming into land. It's slow, it's close to the ground. And then there's thunderstorms in the area. And a big column of air comes down and shoves the airplane right into the ground. Now we train on how to get out of that And depending on how severe it is, you can get out. And if it's really, really severe, you can't. So we, in fact, do put people in the no-win scenario. Occasionally, our training script says, program an unsurvivable wind shear event for this person. So it's done to show them that they can do everything right, and Mother Nature can still toss their little airplane into the ground. So it highlights the importance of also avoiding wind shear position or situations whenever possible, rather than just assuming, oh yeah, I passed it in the simulator, I'll be fine, we can just press on. So you don't want to ignore it, and it's just to drive that home point. And I will say that in the simulator, when you see the ground coming up, it's still really uncomfortable. So, and a friend of mine trained astronauts for NASA many years ago, and when they did training simulators, they were not allowed to give the astronauts no-win scenarios. I don't know how they do it now or a lot of the specifics, but in those cases, there always had to be a resolution. So, like I said, I don't know how they train now, but at the time, that's how they did it when she was a trainer. So any questions or anything about Kobayashi Maru before we move on? Okay. And I can't see any questions popping up, so I will just press on.
I'll jump in real quick with a comment.
Sure.
I remember reading in the context of Apollo 13, there was a comment to the effect of that usually in the simulators at NASA, they'd throw at most 2 different things at the same time. They wouldn't do more than that.
Yeah.
And so that's actually one of the things that made Apollo 13 sort of notable, in that there was way more than just 2 problems going on at that time.
Yeah. And in the simulator, for the most part, we only give them one emergency at a time to deal with. I've had 2 before, but that's it. So it doesn't get too much crazier than that for the most part, unless it's, really bad. I did get somebody in the simulator. I was in the simulator the other day, and they shut off my engines at 10,000 feet and said, find a place to land. So that was a fun and interesting challenge. So
how did that turn out?
Landed on the numbers.
Pretty good.
So yeah, worked out okay. But we don't get a lot of glider practice. So that's not something airline pilots get to practice. So unless you actually go out and rent a glider.
It's helpful if you've got a big river nearby.
Yeah, a river also helps. That's we use approach plates or approach charts for different airports and arrivals into airports. And someone made up an approach chart for that landing in the Hudson River. They believe they call it the Sully 1 arrival. So, yeah. Okay, so the Corbomite maneuver. The Enterprise is out mapping in deep space. And I picked this one. There's not a space battle here, but I picked this one because I think it's interesting, and it really shows us a little something about Kirk. So the Enterprise is mapping deep space when the Enterprise happens to unknowingly go into alien space. A big cube comes out and kind of follows them and sits in front of them and stuff. And so it's a cube, it's some sort of probe or buoy. And eventually Enterprise tries to get away from it, and it emits some radiation. So Kirk feels there's no choice. He shoots some phasers at it and blows it up. But shortly thereafter, they encounter a really large, really powerful vessel, as you can see right there. So, and it grabs hold of the Enterprise in the tractor beam, and they give the Enterprise, basically they said, hey, start praying to whatever deity. We're going to give you 10 of your time units called minutes, and prepare for destruction and go. So they start their 10-minute countdown. Sulu's counting down the numbers as they go. The navigator, Lieutenant Bailey, he melts down under the pressure, gets relieved, and sent off the bridge. Kirk is sweating. He's pacing back and forth. His crew's looking at him. You ever have that feeling where a bunch of people are looking at you, waiting for you to make a decision or say something and do something? So I'm sure that's the kind of pressure he was feeling at the time. and the alien countdown keeps going. But Kirk doesn't give up, and he still takes responsibility as he's walking the bridge there with Spock. He says there must be something we've overlooked. Perhaps the better answer might have been, or he said, perhaps there's something I've overlooked. He's kind of taking it personal. Maybe the better answer might have been him saying, perhaps there's something we've overlooked. And I'll contrast this with let's call it JJ Kirk. I'll contrast it with JJ Kirk in the movie Into Darkness, when they were being chased by that larger ship, and then the Admiral was about to blow up the Enterprise, and when faced with destruction, JJ Kirk simply turned to the bridge crew and said, "I'm sorry, guys. I guess we're screwed." So Kirk, up to the last minute, is still trying to come up with something. But Spock's reaction is Kirk looks to him and asks, "Hey, do you got something? You got any ideas?" And Spock thinks for a second and he says, "Hey, in chess, when when one is outmatched, the game is over. Checkmate." And Kirk gets pissed, and you actually see Spock probably feel ashamed. He actually bows his head, and he even starts to say, "I'm sorry." So it's like one of the few moments where you see Kirk berate Spock and Spock act like an ensign there. So Kirk is not pleased with his first officer and says, "Is that your best recommendation?" So anyways, this situation has all the hallmarks of a no-win scenario. But then a little while later, McCoy comes onto the bridge. They're about 4 or 5 minutes away from being blown up from a giant alien ship, and McCoy's harassing Kirk about, "Yeah, you pushed the navigator too hard. My medical log's going to show you promoted him too fast." And Kirk's about to take his head off. But McCoy leaves and he says, "I'm going to put it in my log, and that's no bluff." And Kirk gets pissed and says, "Anytime you can bluff me, Doctor." And then McCoy walks off the bridge. So, but Kirk sits there and thinks for a second, and then he's been given an idea, and he thinks, "Not chess, Mr. Spock, poker." And that's the game we need to play right here. And so so basically it's important to know the game you are playing. And Kirk changes the game, okay? At first he was playing a game of, he was thinking in terms of brute force, right? They were just going to get blown up by this more powerful ship in the next several minutes. So he changes the game from chess. If you've got a couple pawns and a king and you're up against, the full force of your opponent, you're still probably going to lose. They're going to win by brute force, or they can win by brute force. But poker can be a little bit more subtle. And so, as I said, you always know what game you're playing. And in this case, Kirk changes up the game. But there's also one more game, and this is just, I'm going to add this tongue in cheek, but there is one more game to add to the mix, and that is chicken. So probably a slight variation of poker. But, in chess, the thing is in chess, you can see the board. There are no secrets. So in this particular situation, there were no secrets. Great big ship, more powerful, more technologically advanced, it's going to blow them up. However, in poker, when you can't see the other person's cards and they can't see yours, the person in a weaker position can just as easily win with one good hand. It still requires skill to win in poker, just like, it's still a skill, but you can win with basically a losing hand. So, and then of course there's chicken, which is kind of a mutually assured destruction sort of game where only the most dedicated player is going to win. So there's an element of bluffing, obviously, to that. You can see the enemy, but you can also bluff the enemy. So it's a little bit of a hybrid game of both chess and poker, I think. But the point is Kirk comes up with a bluff that says, "Hey, we have this stuff called Corbomite on our ship. If you destroy us in equal an equal amount of destructive energy is going to get turned back on you, and I'm going to blow you up. And in all our history, no Earth ship has ever been successfully attacked. And suddenly the countdown goes past 10 minutes, and they're not dead yet. And then from there, the discussion starts, and then we see the rest of the episode where they eventually make peaceful contact with these people. So it's an interesting scenario, but it's Kirk's ability to change the game that's going on, turns the situation on its head. Any questions or comments about that one?
Yeah, let me jump in for just a second. So Corbomite Maneuver was season 1, episode 10 in the order shown.
Yes.
It was actually the first production episode after the 2 pilots that they filmed. So it's the first episode with Dr. McCoy. It's the first episode with like Lieutenant Uhura and some other folks like that. And so it's sort of interesting. I mean, I know that you talked about how you weren't going to retcon that and deal with inconsistencies, etc. But it really is sort of interesting in that this was not they didn't know what Star Trek was yet.
Yep.
This is one of the earliest attempt of them trying to sort of figure out what Star Trek looks like. I think this might be the first time that we ever actually see like another ship in this series, right? Because there wasn't one in either of the pilots, was there?
No, there wasn't.
So I mean, they talk about the one crashed ship, but there wasn't actually a ship there. So it's sort of interesting watching how the relationship between Kirk and Spock starts out, etc. There's stuff you see in this episode that you wouldn't expect to see in other episodes. And it's sort of, you sort of see stuff that doesn't seem typical, and it's because they're still kind of figuring out what that relationship looks like.
Yeah, and you see Spock kind of, he sounds a little bit like, but a little toned down, but he sounds a little bit like the early Spock you see in the Cage or the Menagerie.
Spock here?
What's that?
Spock here?
Yeah, right, exactly. He has that weird sort of way of talking that they eventually abandoned. So you see some elements of that one in this episode. So, but I think it is one of the really good episodes, I think. Okay, so next, how are we doing on time here? We got 5 more minutes. Okay, so I think we can do Balance of Terror pretty quick since we went over this. We got a whole other video dedicated to it. So I'll go through Balance of Terror real quick, and then I think we can probably pause there. So, Balance of Terror is this is like the first dedicated space battle that we see. They dedicated a whole episode to this battle. And basically, here's the situation. As you can see on the screen there's that dot. In the show, it was a blinking dot, and it's moving towards the Romulan neutral zone. There's no contact from Outpost 2. That's represented by those triangles. By these triangles right here, those are the different outposts. There's no contact from Outpost 2. Spock calls down while they're having a wedding and says Outpost 3 has gone silent. And then, Kirk says, keep me informed. And then the wedding is actually interrupted when Outpost 4 is attacked. And Kirk runs up to the bridge. He's talking to the commander, and then they get to witness the Romulan ship Decloak fire at Outpost 4 and destroy it. So this is, like I said, this is Kirk's actual first known battle. He's not any kind of legend. No one knows who he is. He's just a fairly new heavy cruiser captain in command of the Enterprise. It's possible there's some older canon and or beta canon, I guess. Maybe he was captain of a smaller ship like a destroyer, but that's uncertain. So we have no known previous canon space battles with Kirk as the captain. And so this is his first time. So in this particular case, he's not just chasing a pirate. He's not just chasing Harry Mudd through some asteroids or anything like that. And this has strategic implications because this is, they fought a war with the Romulans, and this may have some serious war or peace implications. As we see in the discussion they have in the briefing room before the battle, where the conclusion is that even Spock agrees that we need to fight this battle to prevent a war. Because if the Federation appears to be weak, the Romulans are going to go home and say, yep, the Earthers are weak, let's go get them. And then they'll have an even bigger problem. So they engage. So the Enterprise ends up engaging and following the Romulan vessel after it destroys the base. As far as the advantages go, the Federation, the Enterprise is a faster ship. And however, its phasers appeared to be very unreliable under the stress of combat. They burned out a few times and ended up killing some of the weapon crews, or a member of the weapon crews. The Romulan vessel had a very experienced captain. The Centurion reference, I've flown 100 campaigns or fought in 100 campaigns with you, and still I don't understand you. So he and the Centurion, the older gentleman here on the right side, is his Centurion and long-time companion, and they fought a lot of battles together. The Romulan has the advantage of a cloaking device. It's very low visibility. The Enterprise can still follow generally where it is, but it's not good enough for targeting weapons. And I know Chris has talked about that difference between information, contact, or a firing solution quality type of information that lets you actually hit something. Disadvantage of the cloaking device is that it's got a high power drain as well. So it does cost the Romulan something to be able to use the cloaking device. And then finally, they've got a plasma torpedo. It's a very powerful torpedo, but it also has a high power drain on the ship, and it takes a while to arm it. But if it hits you at close range, you're pretty much doomed. So, and as we saw that it took 2 hits from the plasma torpedo to destroy the outposts on the outpost 4. Took 2 hits. They got their deflectors up in time. First hit knocked out their defensive screens, and then the second hit finished off the outpost. So we can anticipate that probably it would take a couple hits, but even the Enterprise would be in a lot of trouble. So basically, a big cat and mouse game ensues. The Enterprise is faster and more maneuverable. The Romulan ship's got its cloaking device and really destructive plasma torpedoes. However, the range of the torpedoes is limited, and you can run away from the torpedo, and the warhead strength will diminish over time. And the Romulan has to decloak. Think of it as a submarine that has to surface before using its deck gun, so to speak. It's got to become visible before it can do it. So as the Enterprise is chasing it, the Romulans are heading towards a comet, and Kirk decides to head it off. When the Romulan ship, and his plan is that when the Romulan ship emerges on the other side of that comet, it's going to be visible and can be targeted. However, when a subordinate manning the scanner, so the Romulan is aware that he's being followed, the Romulan commander is, and then as they approach the comet, one of his subordinates manning the scanner reports that the Enterprise isn't there anymore. The commander guesses what Kirk's plan is. He takes some evasive maneuvers because he too plans to use the comet to mask him turning around and hitting the ship that was pursuing him. So they both took advantage of the comet for different reasons, and there were disadvantages to each of their plans, and they each exploited that. So when the Enterprise, waiting on the other side of the comet, sees nothing, doesn't see the ship appear, Kirk realizes that the Romulan guessed his move, and he orders just the phasers to be fired blindly, which ends up hitting the Romulans. Later on, the Romulans are almost beaten. They plant a nuclear weapon amongst a bunch of jettisoned debris. As the Enterprise is chasing them, Spock detects the metal-cased object. Kirk turns and orders point-blank phasers to fire, which detonate the device. Enterprise is damaged, but not completely out of the fight, even though the phasers are damaged. Anyways, Kirk orders operations to work at minimal power to exaggerate the damage and lure the Romulans in for a kill shot. So this is something we're going to see again from Kirk. He likes to play dead and then let somebody get in closer and then hit them. So although the Romulan commander suspects it's a trap, his subordinates, who are politically well connected, they pressure him to attack the Enterprise, and they offer to do it. Hey, go to your quarters, old man. We got this. But he says, no, I'm going to do this on my, I'm going to lead the attack. So when the Romulan ship decloaks to launch a torpedo, Kirk tries to spring his trap, but again, the phasers fail, and the Romulans still haven't had a chance to fully arm their torpedo, so they've got some time. Spock runs in, fires the weapons, saves Styles, and one of the other guys die. Tomlinson dies. And then, but Kirk is able to fire phasers and mortally wound the Romulan ship. He hails the Romulans, and they end up communicating directly with each other. Kirk offers to beam aboard the survivors, and the Romulan says, "Nope, not our way. Sorry, we're not going to be taken prisoner." And he triggers the self-destruction system. The battle casualties include Lieutenant Tomlinson and Kirk. Kirk goes to the chapel to provide comfort to the grieving Ensign Martine, who was supposed to marry Tomlinson in the wedding that we saw at the beginning. So, really good episode. I think I think it still holds up pretty well. I mean, it's a 50-year-old space battle, but I think it's also one of the first televised, space battles that we see, in television and entertainment. So, I really enjoy it. As far as tactics from each of them, they both took time to analyze the action of the other person. So good idea, good mantra is to fight the man, not the machine. They both made use of the terrain of space. They used the comet, the one thing that was out there. They both tried to use deception. The Romulan used a nuclear bomb as a mine and tried to hide it with debris. Kirk played dead, and of course, this becomes a Kirk classic. And then Kirk used his greater maneuverability and took lots of long-range shots because he, like a boxer with longer arms, he could just punch from longer range. And even if he just picked away at the Romulan doing little bits of damage at a time, it kept the Romulan off balance. And the strategic impact of all of this was that the Romulans remained on their side of the neutral zone. And Starfleet realized that's probably some form of intelligence failure as far as they're concerned. Starfleet knew they needed intel on the cloaking device and how it worked. And this encounter is probably the reason why we see that Kirk was chosen to steal the cloaking device later on in the Enterprise incident. So it's a little bit after 10. So I think I will pause it here. We will pick it up next week, starting with the arena.
All right. Excellent work there. And a good summary. Yeah, Bounce the Terror is just such a classic episode.
Yeah.
Just
real fan of that one.
Yeah, I think everyone is. And, obviously the parallels to classic, World War II sub-movies are obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the things I think that makes it truly great, a truly great episode. Mark Leonard is just so amazing as the Romulan commander. He just really makes you feel for him. You really understand. I think that is the power of great writing. Is when I think we certainly looked at that, and certainly Richard Hatch and I, when we were talking about Axanar, would look at that episode and say, you don't want to see him as an enemy. You want to see him as an antagonist, right? You don't see him as a bad guy. You see him as just the guy on the other side.
He's following orders from his superiors and stuff, just given a mission that he's got to go carry out.
Right, exactly, and I think it's really good, and it's amazing because for such an early episode, we really see a lot of character development for Kirk and Kirk and McCoy.
Yeah, all the characters there. Yeah, and and I didn't really talk about it, but at some point, this is Kirk's first battle, and they go through the anguish. He's down in his quarters while they're sitting there, everyone's quiet, and he's able to talk openly to McCoy, and he's like, why me? How did I get stuck with this? This is a really crappy day, because on the weight of his shoulders is war and peace. So yeah, it's good. It's really good. I think it's a really deep scenario or story. The other thing I like is that, Mark Leonard's character in there, he kind of makes me feel like he's sort of the old guard that's getting killed off in the Romulan Empire. And it's morphing into what we see later on of these sneaky, dishonorable people. As the cloaking device technology matures, they realize, well, we can be a bunch of sneaky bastards. And there's the thing with Decius, who has powerful friends and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he sends a message, during the battle, he breaks radio silence and sends a message to somebody to let the Praetor know, which makes me think he's got as it said, he's got friends in influential places. And he's out there bragging and stuff like that. He's one of those young generation that suck, that the old guard like Mark Leonard doesn't like. So I think it's
question
good.
from Leon Chirot, Alec, Chris, and Pat. Any application of these findings to Axanar? I think I just mentioned it. I think that we certainly Richard and I, in talking about Karn, drew parallels to characters like Mark Leonard's character in this episode, and I think other than that, though, I think Axanar, certainly the combat in Axanar is a lot more complex, and obviously a lot more ships. But I think what you take out of this episode is just it's kind of the overall tenor and the tone of the episode is one of the things that I think that is important when we're writing Axanar. It's to make sure that we pay attention to the overall tone, so it doesn't just become photon torpedo porn, right? That there's depth to it, to the characters and the story and the combat. I think that's really, really important as well. So there you go. Hopefully that answered your question. I think there was a question for Chris too, Matthew Bracey. Okay, Matthew. I'm sure Chris can reach out to you.
Yeah, there isn't really a question there yet, but I'm expecting there will be one at some point. So Mark Leonard is an interesting guy. He had 2 firsts in Star Trek. So he's really the first guy to ever play a Romulan. He's also the first person to ever speak Klingon.
Yeah, he's played a Romulan, a Vulcan, and a Klingon.
Yeah, and so he played the Klingon in the opening scene of the motion picture that spoke Klingon for the first time.
Yeah.
So that was told to me by my friend Lawrence Shun, who's the president of the Klingon Language Institute. And also a science fiction writer. And you may recall, Alec, that when I went down to Axicon at SphinxCon, I had a long talk with J.G. Hertzler. Ended up talking to him for like a half hour. Neither one of us ever mentioned the word Star Trek in that entire conversation. It was about the fact that when he was young, he was a Fed. He worked for GSA, and I am still a Fed. And we also talked about he did the audio narration for Lawrence's book Barsk in the sequel, which I can't remember the name of the sequel, but it's also got Barsk in the title. And I had just been talking with Lawrence the week before that. So, but I remember Lawrence saying that he had gotten a chance to meet Mark Leonard, and it was very exciting for him because he's the first person that we ever saw speak Klingon.
Oh yeah, cool.
Also, the first person I ever saw at a Star Trek convention, I think. I'm sorry, that's not true because I went to one in New York and I saw Walter Koenig. But I was in law school at the time in North Carolina, and this is when I first got aligned with Starfleet International, and Mark Leonard was the guest at the convention. I'll never forget walking by him in the hallway. I was like, oh my God, he's just like us. He's an awesome.
Yeah, I met Walter Koenig, and I got to see James Doohan talk, and he was up there with the character that played, or with the actor that played Mud, and those two were just hilarious. I still remember that as a kid, just laughing my head off the whole time. They were fun. Very entertaining.
I bet.
Leon is also asking, how do we plan to have Axanar released? It is 2 15-minute episodes. So you saw Prelude to Axanar. That it was just 20 minutes. We will have 2 more episodes just like that coming out here in next summer, hopefully. So there you go. Well, listen, we are past our time, so we're going to wrap it up. But we will be back next Saturday. Pat will continue going through. Which episodes do we have next, Pat?
So we've got the Arena, Errand of Mercy, and then I'll add one of the other ones. But those were 2 I'd planned to talk. Arena and Errand of Mercy they'll get a little quicker because there was a lot of information with the Kobayashi Maru and a lot to talk about with Balance of Terror, of course. But we'll be able to move through some of the other ones because the battles are relatively short in that one. In those.
Good. And last thing, I'm just going to remind everyone the new challenge coins are in the Ares Studio store. The Daedalus class hospital ship / Federation Starfleet disaster response. The USS Hercules, which is Sam Travis's ship with the First Fleet on the back. And the USS Ajax with the First Fleet back. By the way, Pat and Chris, I'll just ship you guys off a set of these.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So everyone else has to go donate for them. So go to the studio store. You want to do a show on our channel, we'll hook you up with free swag. Other than that, you got to pick. All right. That's it for now. Listen, everyone, thank you so much as always. It's been, I will say in the real world, it's been interesting listening. On the way in, I was listening to a podcast where they had some medical experts talking about the vaccine and how it's a vaccine for the coronavirus, which I thought was great. It was really interesting. And one of the things that was interesting, he was talking about how the virus is actually pretty stable. It hasn't been going through a lot of mutations like the flu virus does on an annual basis, which means the efficacy of the vaccine will be higher, which is really important. But nonetheless, it was really interesting to hear him say, even with the vaccine, even if you get the vaccine, 2021 will be a really important year to wear a mask. So, as always, and there was a reason for it, because like the virus could, exist in you even if you're immune to its effects. So, as always, please, please, please wear your damn mask. Socially distanced. This thing is not over, and thanks to a lot of super spreader events, it's getting worse all over the country. So please,
it's the worst it's ever been.
Yes, yes. Please be careful out there, and please take this seriously. I live in Georgia, which it shocks me how many people don't take it seriously and don't wear masks. And listen, I've already had it. I technically probably don't need to wear a mask, but I do because they tell you to. And I listen to Dr. Fauci and all the experts, and I would this is our little PSA, wear your damn mask. But in the meantime, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Pat. Another amazing show. Love it as always. We will be back next week to hear more about spaceship combat. And as always, if you have any questions, you can reach Chris or Pat or myself on Facebook. Feel free to reach out to us and comment. And thank you again to Lissa Beck, our wonderful producer, who's behind the scenes drinking and smoking and whatever else she's doing back there, so she doesn't have to be on screen. So Chris, Pat, and everyone out there, live long and prosper, and we will see you all next week. Cheers.
All right, everybody.
See.